Hello and welcome to today's webinar about EDGY Visual Language for Collaborative Enterprise Design. My name is Wolfgang Göbel, and together with me we have the marvelous
Hi, I'm Milan Günther. Hi. Welcome to this webinar. I'm usually based in Paris, but today I'm in Berlin, and it's sunny.
And you use the Trans-Europe Express, probably?
I would have liked to.
Yeah, so maybe a bit of the history. So I'm coming from the enterprise architecture community. So I have this typical career, and I started in IT and project management, and then I've done 15 years of enterprise architecture. And I was quite frustrated with the very limited impact. And 3.5 years ago, I founded Architectural Thinking Association to make enterprise architecture a more lightweight approach. And then I met Milan 3 years ago, or more than 3 years ago, who was totally alien back then because he launched something like enterprise design. So what does this mean?
Yeah, so I actually coming from a very different background, but having a very similar frustration like Wolfgang. So I have a background in design, so studied design, a little bit more than 15 years ago. And then started to work in user experience, product design, service design, and also realizing that a lot of the great designs, the great concepts, the great solutions that me and my team we were making actually really never saw the light of the day. And trying to find out why and getting into all of these intricacies of the organizations, the enterprises that actually are supposed to deliver any great product, service, or experience. Sorry, I'm distracted by the chat. I hope you can all hear me. Like organization design, operations, architectures, basically raining on the parade of any great product, service, experience, vision.
And then in the beginning, when we met, this was pretty alien to me. And I was so used to make it feasible and the structural way, the relational way. And so this is the blue facet in our EDGY model. If you followed some of our blog posts, for example, my whole thinking is very rational and engineering and IT systems and entities, data and all of this stuff. And that's this typical inside view. So that was my starting point before I met Milan. And over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, we co-designed this facet model. We co-designed EDGY, a visual language for collaborative enterprise design. So there was some enterprise design framework previously driven by Milan, and maybe we or I, the community, added a bit of architecture. And today what we want to talk about is a very mature draft of EDGY. So the idea is that we're going to publish it in June probably. So maybe there's not a fixed release date, but we are close. It's still some work to do because writing everything down is some work. And today we will talk about EDGY, and you can learn and please ask your questions. So just type them to the chat, and we will have some Q&A after a 30, maybe 40 minutes presentation. Video and slides will be sent to all registrants, so you can forward them and so on. So shall we start?
Let's start. Yeah, so first of all, so we are using the term enterprise design, and the reason for that is that other terms that are in theory synonymous are actually quite loaded terms. So maybe you are into enterprise architecture or business architecture or business design or service design or organization design or business analysis. And all of these aim at making enterprises, organizations, and businesses better, right? So better structured, better performing, more successful, greater places to work, and so on and so on. And we are using the term enterprise design, basically just turning it on its head and saying, so what is it that we are actually designing? And what we are designing here is the enterprise. The enterprise being the ambitious endeavor behind the reason, or the reason behind an organization's or a business's existence. What do we mean by design? We mean basically everything you need to decide and shape and put into and co-create and put into place to make that enterprise successful and to realize that ambition. And one of those things might be getting together an organization, designing your products and services, architecting the operations, making people comfortable at work, getting customers, convincing them, having good relationships with suppliers, with partners, and so on and so on. And a lot of the these terms are I used the term loaded before. They are coming with a lot of history, right? So organization designers traditionally work with leaders and HR. Enterprise architects traditionally work with IT and technology and operations. Product and service designers traditionally work with marketing and customer experience. But in order to make the enterprise as a whole, as a system successful, we need to understand each other. And this is where the idea of EDGY comes into place. So we need a shared visual language in order to better collaborate and in order to design our enterprises together. And for that, we need to be clear about what it is that we are talking about. What is the material that we are trying to reshape there? What does the environment look like that we try to reshape? What does a design actually look like? Like, what are we designing there? And so EDGY, the goal of EDGY is to make these facets of enterprises, the universal characteristics of an enterprise, visible in a way that we can talk about them, that we can collaboratively map and reshape them, that we can capture all the elements that make the enterprise and make it work and the dynamics in between them in a single model, but with different views that represent our, the different facets and our different viewpoints, right? So maybe a human-centric viewpoint, an organization-centric viewpoint, an operational viewpoint, customer-centric viewpoint, product viewpoint, IT viewpoint, and so on. And so we are morphing the enterprise based on our different viewpoints, and we try to translate between these different views. And this is why EDGY is called EDGY. So it stands for Enterprise Design, a Graphical Morphology. So we're morphing. If you're familiar with morphological analysis, it's quite similar. So we are looking at different views on the enterprise, and we're exploring trade-offs between them, and what a decision in one view means for the other views through models and maps.
Yeah, and we also have had this discussion about, isn't it enterprise architecture and what's the difference? And on LinkedIn, so whenever you post, yeah, we now call it enterprise design, and it's very different. And I also had this discussion with Milan 3 years ago, and it led nowhere, because that's maybe not so important. We also could call it enterprise architecture. We could call it organizational design. That's only a name. But the basic idea is to see an enterprise from different lenses, from different facets. And architecture, engineering, how it works is only one of those facets. That's the blue one, but we have experience and purpose, but we will talk about this in a few minutes. And when you're coming from enterprise architecture like me, or from the IT side, we love models. Yeah? So we have UML models, entity relationship models, Archimate, that's a language for enterprise architects, BPMN process models, and so on. So there are hundreds of different meta models out there that are there for a specific purpose. And so the question is, why do we need another one, and what's the difference? And I like this diagram here where we position it. It's from the book Visualizing Business Transformation. Great book. Yeah? And what they say is, well, there are notations or languages that are more constrained, that are very strict, where you have some syntax and like Archimate or UML models. Usually they can get quite ugly, and they live in more architecting and more engineering communities. And on the other extreme, we have something like Miro, so boards, collaboration, where it becomes more graphical, where it comes closer to photographs and videos. That's very important, of course, to capture maybe emotion and beauty and so on. And EDGY, I think it's a good merger or a blend between this engineering mindset, that's maybe my contribution, and the more artistic aspiration designers have. So it's very much about creativity, and design to me has something to do with art. And with EDGY, we want to bring these worlds together. There is a lot of analytical thinking, demand for analytical concepts in a company, database models, and IT applications and processes, business process reengineering. All of these structured things have their place, of course, but how can we best seamlessly connect it with concepts from the designers, with customer journeys or tasks or storyboards or such things? And that's where we want to position us. And we've created this EDGY language to be a bridge, a connector between disciplines, also a connector between existing models. So if you today model in Archimate, for example, there are good reasons to do it. If you're close to IT, to model everything down until the network node or so, it makes sense. But to connect to other design disciplines, to designers, you also must have something that bridges the gap. So EDGY, it's somewhere in the center, and we want to connect those disciplines. We want to invite them to a co-design space and give them a tool to foster the collaboration, to foster the communication process. And so that means that this language must be beautiful, and we must invite people of various disciplines. They must accept it as this bridge. And so that's maybe that was the design goal, that it's a language for everybody, and that all of those disciplines can have their own specialized notations and tools and methods. But the challenge we want to solve with EDGY is how to bring it together to ensure a coherent enterprise design where the experience is connected to the feasibility, to the architecture, where the purpose, the mission, that's the green facet in our model, we will talk about it in a few seconds, is connected. So all of your existing models make sense for a specific design or architectural challenge. Of course they do. But the challenge we want to solve is how to connect them. That's the idea. And then for that reason, we have these three facets here.
Yeah. So the three facets basically describe what questions we ask when trying to figure out what an enterprise represents. So we ask, why does it exist? Or if we are the enterprise, like if it's about our organization, our business, why do we exist? What is all of this for? Who are we? What is important to us? What is not so important to us? Well, it's the identity of the enterprise. Has to do with purpose, with culture, with the stories that we tell about it. And then we also can ask, what is the role that we actually play in people's lives? What do we do for people? What do we do for customers with our products and services? But also, what do we do for employees? What do we do for partners? What do we do for the general public? It depends, of course, also on what kind of enterprise we are. Maybe we are hospitals, and what's our role in our patient's life? So that's the experience dimension, understand how do we appear in people's lives. And finally, kind of bridging those two, like if we know what we want to do, and if we know what role we are playing in people that we are addressing with whatever we do, how do we make that actually work? How do we operate? What are we capable of doing? And that's what we call the architecture of the enterprise. And you see they are intersecting. So the intersections is basically where it becomes really, really interesting, because in order to deliver on our purpose with an architecture, with an operations, with systems, with processes and capabilities, we have to organize ourselves. We have to work together as a team. We have to figure out our roles and responsibilities and make decisions together and collaborate. And that's the organization intersection. And then if we do that and our architecture works and we actually make products and services available to people as offerings, then they appear in people's experiences as products, product in the wider sense, right? So anything we are making and offering. And that in turn will have a reflection on how we are being perceived by people, how our identity is perceived in people's experiences. And that's what we call the brand. How are we being perceived by people? And then in the middle, where all those facets are intersecting, you have the little elephant, which basically says, okay, our enterprise as a complex entity, what at its heart is actually what it is about, what it is doing. And this is what we call the business. So one enterprise might actually have multiple businesses. You might know some big organizations that do multiple things. But it's like one coherent piece of all of these things together, boiled down to its essence. That's the business, you could say, the business model, the business value, the business core of the enterprise.
And I believe that's a major difference to approaches that are out there. Because what happens today is that you have an enterprise architect, you have a software architect, and each of these design disciplines, they have their special stuff they design. And you have an organizational designer, and they are typically totally different people. So one person designs the org chart, or some people do it, and the IT applications are very different because that's the IT department and had nothing to do with each other. And we don't believe it, we don't buy it. And the other thing is we have people in the experience, and the topic is really big. We as enterprise architects must be aware that there are so many more experienced designers compared to enterprise architects, for example. So this is really a big topic, but usually these guys are very ignorant to the legacy IT, for example. They don't really understand the complexity and what it means to renovate our IT structure. And in a green facet, when it comes to purpose, what companies typically do, they hire some strategy consultancy or some business model consultancy, and a small group of executives works together with a big consultancy on a mission statement, on a strategy. But usually they don't have any clue about, not any, but they don't have enough wisdom about existing capabilities. What's the strength in the company? So we must be aware that we have many disciplines, and the connections today are really weak. Yeah, I've experienced that so often in my work in software development that I get some design from a user interface or from user experience designer, and it wasn't feasible because it was not possible to implement it with the IT system. So means that this intersection, the purple stuff, the product, the concepts of the experience people and the concepts of the IT people usually are not connected. Experienced people don't really understand entity relationship modeling. They don't understand information architecture. That's a pity because information is a big part of experience. That's just one example. And it took us, I think, 2 years to come to the conclusion what's in the white. And when I found this, for me, this was really exciting. Well, it is that simple. It is that simple. Yeah. So it means in the white, what is a business all about? And we believe in the center we have people. It's all about people. The only reason why companies exist is that we serve people. We serve a customer. We serve the employees. They want to have a purposeful job and they want to have some salary. We want to serve the owners. They want to make some money and they want to achieve something with the company. We need to serve humanity. We need to serve the legal authorities and so on. So it's always about people. It means everything we do is we design with and for people. That's very important. And people in an enterprise perform activities. So there's something happening. Yeah, so if you're part in the billing department, you perform the activity billing. And to do so, you need usually quite often you need things like an IT system or some information. So everything that happens in and around an enterprise can be described and can be designed by only four elements. People performing activities together with things. Usually you need a pen to write, or you need a mobile phone to make a call. I need this microphone for the activity providing a webinar. And I'm a person and I want to achieve an outcome. I want to deliver the best webinar I can deliver. And also I want to achieve the outcome to spread our content. So the current situation, what's going on right now, it's people doing activities together with things and outcomes. And that it took us 2 years because we started from existing models like Archimate. They have 35 elements, or like TOGAF, or customer journeys, or there are concepts coming from the organizational design world like business functions and so on. And I think we've read really a lot of books and stuff, and there are hundreds of elements. And when you do that, what you find is that many concepts overlap. For example, a capability and a business function. What's the difference? We'll talk about this in a few minutes. And we drill down to the essence. And the essence is people together with things performing activities to achieve outcomes. And that's in the center of the van. I believe this is kind of the cells of the company. So that's the building blocks. That's what's going on in and around the enterprise. That's a bit also in this WIML build. So I don't know, Milan, want to say a few words about the WIML build?
Yeah, of course, because all of that is quite abstract, right? So yeah, people do activities using things and they are going after outcomes. And we believe really this is the essence of any description, any model of an enterprise, because that's basically what's at the heart of it. But what does it really mean? And so if you look at this picture from a regional German railway company, and we're using railway, by the way, today as an example for everything. We have a virtual, non-existing, fictional railway company that we use for our examples and our trainings. And you see, this is exactly what's happening here. People are using things. You have some people on bikes, some people in the station, some people at the train, some people using the infrastructure, the streets, and so on. So you have lots of things, lots of people doing things, people going after outcomes, right? So, for example, if you're hungry, maybe you buy some sweet stuff. That's the Süßkram there. People going from A to B. So once you are at B, you achieved that outcome. That's what you use the train for, or the taxi. And what you see there also is there are many, many businesses in and around this enterprise, right? So you have the railway company, you have maybe a different station company, but then you have also the bakery and the city running, for example, maintaining the streets. So you have many businesses interacting with each other. You have many people doing activities, using and dealing with things and going after outcomes. And this is the essence of what we mean when we say enterprise. We want to be able to describe what's happening here from different perspectives and using the same language, which is exactly those 5 elements. Yeah.
And we don't only want to describe it, we want to redesign it and make it better step by step. So it's a language to capture the as-is state. And of course, we can have scenarios and the Milky Way enterprise maps and other maps where we can play with future state scenarios and where we can discuss maybe how can we serve this little kid buying Süßkram better? How can we help him better achieve the tasks he wants to achieve? The outcome this kid wants to get is to get some candy, and how can we make it more convenient for him, for example? That's the idea here. So that's maybe no need to go into too much detail, because these 5 elements are pretty straightforward, and you cannot discuss them on LinkedIn. You can discuss on LinkedIn when I write something about capabilities versus business functions and activities, then it goes hundreds of comments. But if you say, we have the concepts of people, everybody agrees, yeah, people and activities. Okay, you cannot discuss those 5 elements. And that's, I think, the elegance and the beauty of this language, because we end some of more abstract and kind of philosophical, theoretical discussion with those 5 elements. I think we've had this one before.
Yeah, it's just to remind, when we now actually take the facet model that we and the intersections before, and we combine that with those elements, what that then results in. So what are those elements translated to the perspectives here? If we look at the enterprise from an experience point of view, what do these elements translate in compared to what translate to compared to what do they translate to when we look at the enterprise from an architecture, from an operational point of view? So yeah, if you go to the next one, so you see here, so we have outcomes, activities, and things from the perspectives of the facets and the intersections. And what you see there is that if we look at it from an experience point of view, Wolfgang just mentioned there's a kid that wants to buy some sweet stuff. That's a task. I want to, when I actually eat the sweet stuff, that's when I achieve my outcome, which is my task. I go through a journey via a channel. The channel in this case is like a real world interaction, as opposed to, for example, calling via a phone or using some kind of app. But I'm getting a product and I'm interacting with an enterprise as a brand. And then the enterprise itself, again, you can look at it from an identity point of view. So what's our purpose? Maybe we want to make the best sweet stuff in the world. And for that, we have to, and maybe our story is, it's not only sweet, it's also healthy. I'm not sure about that, actually. That example. And we have to describe this, what we are doing, and the content that we actually put in front of people when we talk about ourselves. For example, maybe it's the menu of everything you can buy. Maybe it's the story of how we came to make the most healthy and sweet chocolate in all of where was this, Middle Germany. And so you see that we use the same elements, but we translate them. And finally, if you look at it from an architecture point of view, what can we do? What do we need to be able to do in order to make an offer and bring this stuff to the world? What are the assets that we need? What's our production process? And how does that then translate to the product that we can offer?
Yeah, we can take the example with the candy because that's a product. And of course, there are some processes in the production of the candy, of the sweet stuff, production processes, and you have some logistics. Somebody must have delivered the candy to this little Süßkram shop. And you need to have some assets to bring this candy to the Süßkram shop, maybe a car, somebody delivered it. You need maybe a machine that produces that stuff. So that's where it comes to this architecture facet. But I think we can dive into this into more detail, because now we can go to the facets. So as Milan mentioned before, facet focus identity is very much about purpose. Who are we? Why do we exist? What's the larger purpose? And so on. What matters to us? And we all are familiar with the mission, vision, strategy. So there's a huge body of knowledge in this mission, vision, strategy. And most companies have a mission statement. The question is it a good mission statement? So what does good mean? And then we have content. So content means, how do we communicate this purpose? So the mission statement itself, it's content. It can be written down. You can have an image video. You can have pictures. You can have a glossy brochure. We all know these brochures. And for us, the element, the activity element, so that's the arrow here, that's the story. That's the story about who we are, where do we come from? What's our history? What coined us? What's our legacy? What are our strengths and weaknesses because of our history? And where are we now? And what's the story we want to continue in the future? So if you know this book, there's this book with the famous story book, The Heroes in 5 something. So it's very important. We believe that the companies not only write the stories down, but communicate and have it in their values. But I have a bit of an example here. So for example, this is content, and that's a text on the webpage of Austrian Railways, and I've worked for them for 4 years or so. And what they say, maybe it's not the most vivid mission statement, and maybe they're a bit a boring national railway company, but it's a good example to illustrate what we mean by these 3 elements. So the text itself, it's just content, and it could be a picture, and they of course have an image video, so that's quite straightforward. And the purpose is to answer, who are you? Why are you there? So they say we are pioneers of a modern customer-oriented rail transport. And then they say, what are we doing? So we plan, develop, maintain, and that's what we do to ensure punctuality, security, cleanliness. So that's all what's important to them. You can say that these are goals. You can say these are unique selling propositions. It's very important to communicate that these are important KPIs, maybe, for example. But they tell it in a form of a story. They don't say much about where they come from, so I'm not sure if it is the best example. Yeah, and at the end, it continues with the purpose, maybe. So we thereby provide the right conditions for an efficient, reliable passenger and freight service by rail. So this might sound familiar because many mission statements are made this way. But we will see that the connection between the mission statement and the capabilities, the blue, is very important, because if you have a mission statement that is not backed up by the actual deliverable, so because when ÖBB infrastructure says we have the plan to fly to Mars, for example, and they don't have the capability and the feasibility and the assets to do so, nobody will believe the story. So we think that the green facet here must be very well connected with the blue facets. We will talk about the blue facet in a second or so. And we all know brands that quickly fall apart when there's a mission statement and nobody really trusts this mission statement. And there's a lot to discover and a lot to come with EDGY version 1.0. We are working maybe on a more exciting example. It's still the hardest part, so that's what we also learned. To get this part of an enterprise design right is really not that easy. We all know that. And the element, the round element, so that's about outcomes. For us, we call it purposes. Some people use goals. We also have discussed what's the difference. And I just, in this example, I present some of Austrian Railways goals, purposes. So they mention punctuality, safety, and they are punctual. So that's really a purpose, and you can measure it. So it becomes a goal or an objective. And they also have the goal or the purpose to bring people together. So that's maybe a higher outcome for society. That's not directly measurable. They want to be cost efficient for the owner, the Republic of Austria. Of course, they want to have a cost efficient to save money. That's an important goal or outcome. They want to help people with seamless mobility and so on. And so this is a goal or purpose portfolio. If you're interested in more detail, there's also a webinar I gave it 1 month ago. It's on our webpage. You can watch 1 hour when I talk about how to design a good goal portfolio. So how do we recognize that these are good goals? For today, I just mentioned it. Okay, these are goals, might not be so surprising. It gets really exciting when you connect the green with the blue. That's what we will do in the remainder of the presentation.
Yeah, so the green facet is not completely straightforward, as we have seen. You know, some enterprises are actually struggling to define why they exist. And you know, you have read your share of generic, uninspiring mission and vision statements, or inflated marketing language. And if we switch focus now and we look at the red facet, which is the experience facet, it's kind of similar, you know, because many people or many enterprises say, we want to design an optimal customer journey. We want to be customer centric. We maybe they have a customer experience department and they are constantly asking everyone whether you would recommend their services to your friends on a scale from 1 to 10 or something like that. When you look at experience, what we are actually looking at is the same elements, but from a personal people's point of view. So if I have an experience, I want to tackle some kind of a task. So maybe I want to get from A to B, or I want to eat something, or I want to get a job, or I want to get a job done as part of my work. So that's my task. And while I perform that task, I will be on some sort of journey, a user customer journey, whatever, patient employee journey. And I will deal with enterprises, with products and services, with tools and so on via certain channels, can be online, offline, in person, in the physical space, in the metaverse, maybe in the future. And in those journeys and for those tasks, I use products. And I deal with enterprises they appear as brands, right? So I will go on my Apple iPhone, open some app, for example, buy a railway company, buy tickets via that app, and so on. And then, so the brand communicates with me via certain channels. And so the questions that we ask here is, okay, what is the actual life that we try to integrate here into? Like, what do people actually experience? Where are opportunities for us to provide value? And what are the moments where we really can make a difference for people? And so one example here is, again, for our fictional railway company, is a night train. So here you have actually the night train series of Austrian Railway, and you see the experience looks actually like this, right? So you're standing at the railway station, looking at the train. Maybe it's not open yet, you have the compartment. What does it look like inside? Is it comfortable? And of course, you have the app that tells you where and when the train is going, that has your ticket and so on. But what we see today is that the focus of service and experience design is shifting more and more to digital. And people tend to forget that the actual experience of someone is in the real world. It's, you see something with your eyes, you are somewhere with your body. And of course, designing user experiences for apps and screens and interactions and so on is important. But when we actually look at the experience of someone and how we as an enterprise can make a difference for someone, we have to look at really what's happening to that person in the real world.
Whenever I talk to colleagues in the IT enterprise architecture space, so the friends of mine, I'm still an engineer, maybe I'm also guilty, we totally underrate this experience facet. It took me 2 years of work with Milan to understand the depth and how deeply you must understand the real world of the customer. So it's not about user interfaces and having the right apps ready. It's about a very deep understanding about the demands, about the feelings, about the tasks that the customer really wants to get. And there are some research methodologies from the designers and so on. And there's some deep wisdom, and also a topic that needs to emerge a bit. Yeah. So we must deeper and deeper understand the purpose of the people, the identity of the people, that they have their demands, and what is it what they really want, what is it what they want to feel, and so on.
Yeah. So if we take one of our goals from before, so for example, let's say we want to provide this seamless mobility here in the top left corner. And what does it mean? It means, so for example, here in 19 minutes, there's a departure of your train. Maybe it could be shorter, right? So because if it's seamless, maybe we can actually make connections in only 5 minutes and there is no waiting time. I know that makes some commuters and railway people used to railway quite nervous. I get nervous if I see it's only 5 minutes because I'm maybe not used to Austrian punctuality in France. But what are the techniques that we actually can use in order to understand people's experiences and map them? And if you just Google customer journey map or experience map, you will find this example from Adaptive Path. It's a very classic one about a company called Rail Europe. And what you see there is, you have a journey with different steps, different stages. You have an illustration of what the customer goes through. It's actually from 10 years ago, or 11 years ago. So that's why someone is actually printing tickets there. Or actually, I think they get the paper tickets by mail, which is not actually happening anymore. But the task is the same. I need some kind of a ticket. Why? Because someone asked me for the ticket. Why? Because, I need to prove that I paid for the journey. But my task actually is to get from A to B, right? And so we want to, and in there you already have some opportunities. So how might we, for example, make a railway service that doesn't require a ticket? So as you see there on journey maps, usually you try to understand the customer, you try to understand what are the journey phases that they go through, what are the tasks that they need to solve, or that they want to solve. And then below, you see that usually already on the journey map, there's some kind of a space for opportunities for us to provide something to them. So for products and services. So for example, maybe we can provide interesting destination offerings, or we have some kind of new planning tools for specific kinds of needs. Like, for example, if we think of the night train offering or the seamless mobility goal. And you have a very classic journey map there behind there. But if we just translate that to an EDGY model, like we did before with the purposes, could look like this, right? So we have the different journey phases on top. We have the different channels of interactions as rows and as channel elements on the left. And then, like in a swim lane, we can actually map what are the tasks that people go through. We can even bring in some data, like, for example, the ones that are yellow, have a yellow line here, are what we call the top tasks. So we have evidence that they are really important, getting on the train on time or booking a ticket. But again, we can challenge that, right? Do we really need for people to book a ticket? getting to the station, having a snack, and then below we can put products, which is already looking into the intersection, right? Because we are not only mapping what we know about people's reality, we are also mapping what we could do in order to fit in there.
And it gets really important when you go from product to the blue, because product is the intersection with the blue. If you look to this map, if you go one step back to this one, that's typically what today happens in user experience design. You think about journeys, you think about tasks, how can we understand our customer better, what our products, what our services. But the people that do it, the user experience designers, usually don't invite, for example, information architects that say, do we have the information for that? Or IT people, do we have the capability for this service? So we must be honest enough that the connection between the service design, user experience design, and the IT side today, it happens, but there hasn't been a language to connect this world until this year. So when we release EDGY, so there will be some. So what does it mean to connect it to the blue? Yeah, so Milan ended with the product here, and that's about product design. And what we want to achieve is that some quite simple concept coming more from the blue space, capabilities coming from the enterprise architecture communities, coming from business schools out of the 50s, that they have a long tradition, and there's a lot of misunderstandings. If you want to learn more, there's a webinar. I gave it 6 weeks ago or so. It's on the recording is on our website. And so we believe that the product designer, the user experience designer, envision the ideas they have should be closely connected to the existing capabilities. What is feasible today? What are our strengths and weaknesses? Are we able to create this product? So if you are a zebra, maybe you cannot climb a tree. If you're a monkey, it's much easier, right? So understand what are you capable of doing, and have a seamless design approach with all the user experience product designers, together with your IT architects, together with the capability designer, with the business experts. That's represented by this simple line, and this simple line is very important for us, because we want to have a seamless approach, a co-design approach, user experience, architecture, design, and so on. And on the other side of architecture, we have this turquoise intersection, the organization. And what's happening today is typically executives structure their department, their business unit, they structure it in a hierarchy most of the time. And they have the power to do so, so they can do it, so they usually do it, maybe hopefully with some help of a consultancy. But this external consultancy usually doesn't know that much about existing capabilities. So the capability design is done by enterprise architects, business architects today, a small community, not closely related with the organizational design. And that's really a pity, and a lot of harm happens because this line is not happening today, right? The organizational designers, they talk about teams, business units, and business functions. They don't use the term capability, but it's almost the same concept. Yeah, some enterprise architects will say, no, totally different, but we believe it's very strong to have just one concept. And we say organizational units, teams have capabilities. I will talk about capabilities in a second. And of course, we have assets in the architecture. And for us, it's not only about digital and not only about IT, because with assets we mean machines and buildings and raw materials and of course IT systems. But we believe you can only do capability-based planning if you include physical assets too, also for cost, to calculate the cost of a capability, for example. And we have processes, and that's pretty classical. And I'm happy to have Tony Benedict here today. So he's the president of the Business Process Management Association. So greetings to Arizona. For us, this is a quite mature discipline, the process management stuff. We all know that there's a good body of knowledge. You have activities, a sequence, you orchestrate some activities. At the end, you deliver a product. And so this is also, that's the activity part in the blue facet. So processes, I will fly over that. Capabilities, we've done a lot of work with them over the last 2 years. Many discussions, many emotions, and there's a whole webinar. And for us, the concept is pretty straightforward. Some enterprise architects, I think, already hate me for that. I don't know. But we say capability simply is like a business component, a cell maybe of the enterprise. So you have people together with assets performing activities to achieve outcomes, or in that case, an output, a bill. So you have a billing officer here, that's the person, and he has an SAP system, that's an asset, and an office, that's also an asset, a physical asset. He has a computer, a machine. He needs some electricity, raw material, and some information. In that case, travel route is an information to create the bill. And that's the concept. For us, this is kind of a cells of the business. So we want to bring the concepts of modularization to achieve business adaptivity in form of this kind of cells. And we believe this should be the basic building blocks, organically growing, of the enterprise. That's capability for us. And we just say organizations have capabilities. And organizations perform processes. So process are related activities our enterprise carries out, and that's quite classical. So I have a step of a sequence in that case of activities to produce an output. There's nothing new in that. That's pretty straightforward. So that's the activity. What's going on in an enterprise, and that's a company. That's an activity. Yeah, and that's the asset. So I think that many people in the IT space underestimate the importance of physical assets. They believe everything is digital. No, but I've worked for Austrian Railways. Only 1% maybe went into IT asset. Much more money, much more design, much more engineering goes into physical assets. So we must involve it, include it in our enterprise design approach. It's not only about information. It's not only about IT system. And we say, okay, assets are needed in capabilities to produce outputs. So in that way, we have the three basic elements in the architecture facet. Yeah? So the capability is the outcome, what we want to achieve to produce a bill, if you want. Assets, that's the thing. Yeah, that's the shop of the Xysgram. Yeah, that's the physical little store here. And the process to produce the candy and so on. So the idea to have only these four elements is reflected in those three elements here. Yeah, and I don't want to dive too deep into the IT stuff because we're running out of time. What you can do is this typical IT application planning. So they have your assets, IT applications, you can assign them to capabilities. That's not new. It gets just much more exciting when you have good capabilities that are owned by the business side. So that's the only message. If you want to learn more, you can visit my webinar. And about organizations, we've talked a bit about them. It's about how do we work together as a team, how do we structure our teams, and so on. So maybe Milan, something to add?
Yeah, maybe, when we talk about organization, what we are actually mapping in EDGY typically is something like this, right? You all know the org charts. Can be circles, can be hierarchy like this. But the important thing here is like the actual information hiding behind this chart and not depicted here really is this question: how do we make decisions? How do we collaborate? How do we traverse across these things? And this is where processes, capabilities, and also stories and our purposes, so the core elements of the facets become really, really important. If we get those right, then the organization design, by which many people refer to the structure, will be pretty simple, because it's basically just mapping what we just figured out, why we're here and what we need to do in order to make products and services available, in order to have a successful business, and work together.
So it's capability first and org structure second. So that how to structure people in teams has only one goal: to serve the capabilities, to produce the right outputs in the best possible way, in a performance way.
And to serve the purpose, right? And so the actual co-design is the purpose and the capability in the context of this other intersection, which is what do we need to do in order to fit into people's lives, right? So what are the products, what are the offerings, products and services that we want to actually successfully place for people to adopt, to buy, to use, and so on. And again, if you look at how products are being mapped, this is also a railway example. So they have a product portfolio, maybe passenger services, infrastructure services, freight services, then loyalty cards, different fares, different offerings basically. And again, this is a hierarchy. This hierarchy is not the starting point. The starting point is actually what are we capable of doing, and what do we know about the people that we are designing for and with in order to come up with this, right? And in the end, actually, with the last intersection that we have with the brand, so how do we actually translate our story, our purpose into people's lives? Again, usually results in some kind of hierarchy. This is an example from France. These are the brands of SNCF. And you see there's a kind of a mother root brand, but then you have all these different brands, product brands for different kinds of services. And if you, I know for people coming from the architecture world, this is normally a little bit further away from their world, right? So thinking about brands and brand value and how to architect brands in order to actually make sense for people and stand for something, stand for our identity. But so that's why I just put this chart also next to this on this slide to show you how incredibly valuable brands can be. So they are real assets, they are real value. It's the value that we have basically in people's minds when they know us and when they know the name, when they know the logo and what it stands for. And what it stands for, again, is coming here from the identity in the context of our experience. But in the end, we have to actually, make all of this fit together, because our brand communication, if we say, oh, we are always punctual, but then our capabilities are actually not making that happen, so our product fails to deliver on that promise, you're stranded at some railway station, so we actually don't address your task to get from A to B, that will reflect badly on our brand. And it is a failure of delivering on our purpose. So that's how, all these things we know are particularly or traditionally treated by different disciplines, different communities, different models, different ways to think, different board areas of organizations like HR, IT, marketing, and so on. But in the end, for an enterprise to be successful, they have to work together to deliver something. And so not much time left, but
I think the next two are the essence. The next, this one, no? For me, this is a good one, because when you showed the example only with experience and product, they say, no, there's something missing. There's the blue missing. Yeah, and if you're honest enough, that's how it happens today. You have the service design, experience designer, product designer, and then they later talk to the IT guys. And wouldn't it be nice to have a diagram like this, a blueprint like this, where we say, okay, that's the journey of the customer. These are the channels and the tasks. That's the result. That's the product we want to achieve. And these are the capabilities maybe we have already, or we need to build up, and then we can have a seamless discussion, and we invite all of these disciplines in a well-facilitated, in a design space, in a negotiation space. There are lots of interests going on in this room, but we must have in this space the viewpoint of the red facet, in that case of the purple, the product, and of the architecture. That's the idea of this service blueprint.
Exactly, and it's a very classic service design deliverable, and this blueprint is structured after the example in Andy Poulain's book, Service Design. But very often in experience and service design projects, basically the bottom part of the blueprint is some kind of fantasy. But if we make this the same model or part of the same model, just a different view of aligned with the capability maps, the process maps, and the knowledge that we have about the actual operations and the actual assets, then the chances for us to actually delivering on this experience vision expressed on top will dramatically increase. And this is also the goal for a Milky Way map, which is another example of how to combine different edgy elements across all three facets on one map, on one shared geography of the enterprise. And we are not going into details about this today, but there's a recording of last week's webinar where you can look into that. Yeah, that's kind of it, almost, right?
It's about, I think that the big message at the end is it's about connecting the three facets. And it's really big if you connect the essence of each facet. So the goals for us are the round element, the goals or the purposes in the center, and you relate them to the capabilities. How can we do it? So that the center here is the why, and how can we do it, and what do we deliver to the outer world? And with the Milky Way Map, we believe we have an amazing tool where we can invite those co-designers and start working together and making those bridges well. So, and then we take only 1 minute for the advertisement. Just who we are a not-for-profit association, and we are quite passionate, and we have a lot, we really want to achieve a lot. We want to help people create better enterprises. That's our mission statement. And we're growing. So we have 5,000, 6,000 newsletter subscribers, 80 advising members. So that's the foundation. We have this diverse community. And with this diverse community, we co-designed what we presented today. It's not only Milan and me, many others also discussed and added their viewpoints. And it's a constant back and forth and review of concept. And as this not-for-profit association, we also publish stuff like this EDGY that will hopefully available in June. And we have an amazing conference coming up in September 26th or so. That's the intersection conference. So you can go to our website, to our events page, and then you get more information on that. And then we have 2 books. So intersection, I think, Milan, that's what you wrote in 2012. And in 2020, we co-authored the book, Milan, Annika, Ambad, and so on. And it's about 35 patterns how to increase your impact on the enterprise. We believe that's quite the foundation of enterprise design. So these are patterns that help you to do enterprise design, no matter if you're an enterprise architect or business analyst or so on. And we believe it's kind of a foundation for all the other stuff we want to publish in the upcoming months and years. Yeah. And there are weekly webinars. So we do these Wednesday webinars weekly. Next week? No, the week
No,
after.
it's actually in 2 weeks because I'm traveling. But yeah, so in 2 weeks, please join me for the story of a service designer who uses EDGY and the Milky Way maps to actually work on a night train scenario in a large fictional railway company.
Early bird of the conference opens next week, hopefully. Yes. It should. So, and yeah, we can meet in Stockholm. So that would be really.
Yeah, please come to Stockholm. We are quite confident that it will be possible. We had to actually leave out last year's conference, and 2020 we did virtually, and so we are very, very excited about our comeback with a real physical event this year.
Yeah. And if you want to stay in touch, you can follow us on LinkedIn. We are pretty active, or you go to our webpage and you can register for the newsletter. Then you can stay in touch. Just keep the Pink Floyd music. I promise next week I do Pink Floyd music when Milan is not here next week. No, then my next webinar will be with Pink Floyd music. Yeah, so I think
let's wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining.
That's it for today.
Thank you, Wolfgang.
Thank you, Milan, and stay tuned. A lot to come.
Yeah.